All right. My name is Jim Suazo. I'm a member of the film committee for the Ridgewood Guild, and I have the honor of moderating this seminar on visual effects being presented by one of the masters in the field. Glenn Allen is a resident of Bergen County and the co-owner of the visual effects studio, Brainstorm Digital. Since 1991, Glenn has worked on some of the most successful movie and television projects. He is credited as producer, director, editor, or visual effects supervisor on over 100 feature films and television shows spanning 30 years, earning 2 consecutive Emmy Awards as visual effects producer on Boardwalk Empire. After graduating Emerson College, Glenn worked in every department in the industry, eventually working his way onto Ron Howard's editing team, where he spent 10 years in Ron's cutting room. With Ron's encouragement, in 2003, Glenn founded the visual effects studio that we mentioned, Brainstorm Digital, which led to many opportunities, such as producing the History Channel series, The Men Who Built America, and producing and editing 2 Neil Young concert movies for Jonathan Demme. While overseeing the visual effects work for Brainstorm Digital, Glenn develops and pitches various projects to networks while producing, directing, writing, and editing others. He executive produced a film in this year's festival, The Morning Breeze. Now, the Ridgewood Guild International Film Festival is excited for this program, and we're very thankful to Glenn for his time and for sharing his expertise. We do encourage participation tonight. And with that, I'll hand it over to Glenn for his presentation.
All right, guys. Welcome to this demonstration. If you have any questions, like I said, raise your hand or wave or something, and we'll try not to go too far ahead. But I'll assume as filmmakers, you have some understanding of visual effects. The reason I do this, and I speak at NYU every semester at a film course called Producing for Directors. The reason we do this is because the films I don't work on, we don't work on big VFX movies like Transformers or Avengers, Spider-Man. We mostly do story-driven films because we're in New York. And I have a small shop. It's only about 15 people. Been going about 17 years with that. But we've kind of, we stayed in New York, and because we're kind of small, we tend to work on story-driven films, which is relevant because, you know, most beginner filmmakers or, you know, your films are story-driven films and you don't have $100 million to spend on them. And a lot of the stuff we do is finding ways to save the production money while fulfilling the director's vision. So they're looking for ways to save money. We make a little bit of that money and everyone's happy in the end, hopefully. But I just want to show some examples of what, so you have a basic understanding of how you can use visual effects efficiently, cost effectively, and still get your vision out there without you know, limitations. Because there's always a way to do it if you plan ahead. It doesn't have to cost $1 million either, you know. So let me jump right into it and stop me. I'm gonna show a couple of examples of movies you may not think are big visual effects movies, but they utilized what we do in order to save some money. The first one I'll show you is going to be The Wolf of Wall Street we worked on. And people were kind of amazed by this. They were like, oh, I didn't know that there were so many shots. I'm gonna share my screen now. So again, this may not play very smoothly across Zoom, and I'm gonna cut the sound out. Can you all see this screen? Okay. So here's an example of a movie you may not think had a lot of visual effects, but it did have a lot of visual effects because Marty doesn't like to travel, and Marty Scorsese is very aware of how he can use VFX as a tool to get what he wants. So I'm going to talk a bit through this. Here's a good example. If you've all seen the movie, if you don't, I recommend it. He wanted to show this opulent modern house in the Hamptons that's surrounded by traditional houses. It doesn't exist. So we went and shot the plate of this house that does exist, and we put the other houses around it. So again, it's a story point. It's not a flashy visual effects moment, but it's a story point. He wanted to show Leo's house being all fancy. Here's a very simple shot, static camera. It's not moving, which makes things simpler always. I'll explain why. So we have a thing, the line. Our job is to shoot a separate plate of people and then just get rid of the trainer. So 2 separate plates. Okay. So here's an example where, let me go back a little bit. So Marty wanted this wedding to exist in a tropical paradise. So we said, okay, here's what you do, which he knows. I'm going to just draw on this a little bit. We said, you know what? If you can shoot this part, shoot that. And what we'll do is we'll shrink it down and we'll shoot a plate and we'll fill in everything else, which is what we did. And those are, the surrounding plate. I'm going to clear that. The surrounding plate is, it's not really CGI, which is computer generated imagery. It's real plates. It's real footage. We went out, someone shot a plate of the water and the trees. We added some fences and stuff, but it's an example of if you want to add scope to a film that you're doing, but you don't have access to a tropical island. Well, you can set up a little set, a little wedding set or something similar. We can shrink it down, and a lot of times with plates like this, you can use stock footage. You can use a still photograph to give your film some scope.
It's got to save a lot of money than renting a mansion.
Exactly. It makes no sense to go to the Bahamas and shoot that for one scene. Here's a very simple shot. They shot this on a first floor studio. The scene takes place in a high rise in Vienna. So they green screen the window, and that's mostly sky back there. It's a very, very simple thing to do. And I'll explain why we use green screen and what that means if anyone wants to know or doesn't know.
I think you could explain that, because like I mentioned, we do have some very young filmmakers here, if you wouldn't.
Okay. Let me go to something a little. Okay, basically, what a green screen does, it creates a matte. And by that, I mean, what we want to do is we tell the computer to find this color green and get rid of it. It creates a black hole. And in that black hole, we can put, in this case, it's a matte painting. And by matte painting, I mean it's a photograph or anything digital that's a 2D image. I think that was actually a photograph, still photograph of a shot in Vienna someplace. But what that does is avoids the use of rotoscoping. You may have heard that term. I'll explain it quickly, and if you need more explanation, let me know. Rotoscoping is also creating a matte. And by, again, creating a matte, you're creating a black hole that you can fill in with something else. You're separating your image. And rotoscoping If we didn't have this green screen, we would have to cut out, I'll draw this. We would have to cut out, hold on a second. Where's my little shape? Here it is. We would have to cut out every character and everything blocking that window frame by frame. So if I go a little further, oh, see there it moved. Now we would have to, hold on a second. Then we do this frame. Basically, you're cutting a mat out so that we can put in our background. And you just erase this the way you would in Photoshop. But that's a very tedious process, rotoscoping. Roto for shorthand. If you hear people say, oh, I got to roto this shot. Oh no, it's possible, but it's going to take you, it could take a week to cut this shot out frame by frame. It's very tedious and time consuming. The green screen does is you tell the computer, find this color value, get rid of it. So it's if the green screen is done well, it's a lot easier to do. That's why you see it a lot. And here's another shot where Marty wanted to make this look like London, but this was shot in Brooklyn. So we said, okay, and he didn't want to spend a lot of money on this. It's one shot in the movie and that's the end of it. How can we do this cheaply? Well, to avoid rotoscoping, instead of cutting out these people and putting them in some different location, we told Marty, all you have to do, and he knows this, but we said, look, if you keep these characters within the door frame, we'll keep the door frame and we'll replace everything else, which you're going to see right here. So there's no rotoscoping, a very simple shot. So there's the shot, we keep the door frame, replace everything else. Very, very simple to do. Now, if they were crossing over this entire background and going all over the place, then we'd have to rotoscope them or put some green screen or something. But here's a case where you use your environment wisely, and you could very simply, and this is just a photograph we got off the internet. And we added these walkers later, but just to give it a little bit of life. But it's a still photograph we found on the internet. It looked good. And there we are, now we're in London. This one's a little more complicated. I don't think this turned out all that well, but again, we use green screen. In this case, the camera is moving, which complicates things a little bit. And I'll explain how we avoid that. Here's another example where all we're going to do, I gotta get my annotate button. All we need to do here, what would make this shot very complicated is if we had to rotoscope all of these characters one by one, frame by frame, and their shadows. Instead, we said, you know what, just build us a piece of this, and we'll fill in the rest. That's what you're going to see here. There's the studio in Brooklyn. And we had a guy, I mean, this is not super cheap because we had a guy who happened to be in Italy and shot some plates for us. We told him the angle and the lens we're using. He went and shot some plates. And as you can see, the only thing the actors are crossing is what was already built. So we keep what they're interacting with. We keep their shadows, no rotoscoping, Super easy shot.
And Glenn, when you mention shooting plates, you're talking about plates of film or something else?
Yes. Yeah. In other words, instead of a still photograph, you can actually shoot moving plates because we have water in this shot. If this was, I don't know, if the whole thing was stone and wasn't moving, we could take a still photograph. Especially if the camera is not moving, you can use still photography in many, many ways. In this case, there's water moving, so obviously we need to shoot a live action plate for that. But if the angle matches, which here it does, it works pretty seamlessly. Here's a shot again. We shot it in Brooklyn. He wanted it to look like Hyde Park or one of the parks in London. So we said, very simple. These structures, again, we took these images from the internet. It's a still camera, very simple to do. We colored the sky a bit, put some of those landmarks back there. And we did something which I don't agree with, but Marty liked. He wanted it to seem like the grass was greener than it should be. So we said, okay, we'll make the grass greener. I think it looks weird, but it's his movie. So, you know, so we did that. This is a very complicated shot. I'll explain it briefly. Again, this turned into a very complicated shot. There's a pullout happening here with a big crane, and there's Leo in jail at the end of the movie. And when Marty shot it, he didn't like the speed of the pullout. It was too slow. So he went to speed up the move in post-production. But then what happens is all the tennis players start running around like they're in super fast motion. Obviously, that doesn't work. So we basically had to rebuild the shot. And the only thing we kept was the floor of the tennis court. It was kind of ridiculous, but it was important to Marty that the zoom happened faster, or the pullout happened faster. So we shot the guys on green screen. We rebuilt everything in CG. Yeah, this was not a cheap shot, but it was the final shot of the movie, really important to Marty, and he got the studio to pay for it. So that's an example of the kind of work we do all the time. Does everyone understand the difference between 2D and 3D? I'm going to explain it. But first, let me show you another reel. This is a reel I show at NYU a lot, and it's our safety. It's our safety reel. We do a lot of guns and blood and driving shots, things that students at NYU either can't get approved for safety reasons because they want to do it for real. They want to use real guns with blanks, which, if anyone knows what happened on the Alec Baldwin set, there's absolutely no reason for that. We've been doing guns and blood digitally for years, and it looks good. I'm going to just show you an example. I'm going to show some things that you can do, some more practical effects. Here's a green screen driving shot. We do this all the time, where we'll shoot the interior in the studio, and then shoot driving plates. In this case, we shot a driving plate. This is for Motherless Brooklyn, the Ed Norton film. So we shot a driving plate, and then we cleaned up the plate to make it look, to put a period car in there. This is a movie, Woody Allen movie called Rainy Day in New York. And this had some real complications. The DP was Vittorio Storaro, famous DP from Apocalypse Now and Last Emperor, and many others, legendary DP. And the rain was a little complication, but it still worked. So he shot the driving plates on a sunny day with no rain. And I was convinced it was not going to work. As you can see, it's, it may not be perfect, but you can shoot driving shots very, very simply with green screen outside your window and shoot your driving plates later. And what that does is you have control over noise. You don't need stunt drivers. You don't need a camera rig on your car. You can do take after take with the actors without resetting the car and holding up traffic and all this nonsense. Nowadays, some people are using LED screens, which you may have seen on something like The Mandalorian, where instead of a green screen, you'll have it's a big TV outside the window. That's becoming more and more popular, which I am in favor of. I think it looks great. And none of my artists like doing these shots because they're difficult. They're difficult to make look great. As you can see, they're never quite perfect. And here I'm showing this shot because what Vittorio Storaro did, the legendary director of photography, when he shot the interior of these scenes, he kept changing the light from orange to blue to orange as they're shooting this. And I'm saying to myself, how in the world are we going to shoot plates where the weather's changing? I said to him, it's impossible. I said, well, I don't know if we can do this. And he put his arm around me and said, Glenn, cinema is illusion. He said, no one will ever know. And I doubted it. And in the end, he was right. To me, this shot is ridiculous. But in the movie, it doesn't make a difference. They're cutting back and forth between Selena Gomez and Timothée Chalamet. And I'm watching it before we did the work. And one shot, the light's orange, then it's blue, then it's orange again. And I'm going, this is never going to work. Sure enough, the film was cut together. And I read all the reviews waiting to see who would point out that, hey, in this scene, it's sunny and then it's not sunny. Nobody knows. The point is, if you're invested emotionally in the scene, you get away with a lot of visual effects shots that you might shy away from VFX shots because you want it to be real and everything needs to be real. Well, cinema is illusion, and you have to use these tricks to save money. For one thing, in this case, you're not only saving money, you're able to do 10 takes with these great actors. Otherwise, if you're in a car with a driving rig, you're gonna spend all day. You may get 3-4 good takes. So, and in the end, nobody gives a darn about the outside if you're paying attention to the movie.
Glenn, I just had a question there on those bigger films that you're talking about, these big studio films. Are you more often talking with the director directly or with the director of photography?
It's really both. If you in pre-production, we usually plan out how they're going to shoot these scenes, and if VFX are involved. A lot of times, I'll read a script first in pre-production, and with the director and producers, we'll go through and say, okay, how are you going to do this scene? How are you going to do that scene? How are you going to do the murder scene? And we all kind of plot it out and figure out what's cost effective and what's going to look the best. Once that's decided, then I'll work with the director and the DP on set to make that work. I'll go supervise on set and make sure the green screen looks good, which in this case, it's good. At first they wanted me to add windshield wipers in CG. I said, no, that's really complicated. I said, just do it for real. We'll see how it looks, and it looked good. Something you'll see in the background here is, you've probably seen this on a lot of movies or making of things is tracking markers.
Yeah.
Which are these things here? Where are my tracking markers? What that does, all that's doing is tracking the camera move. So that when we put our background in, we can make it move with the camera. You see that a lot. If this was a completely static shot, we wouldn't need them. But in this case, the camera's moving a little bit, the car's moving a little bit. The only reason for that is that we tell the computer, latch on to that shape, and the computer can tell us what the camera's doing. That's
Talking about the two X's.
Yeah.
Middle.
probably, yeah, you've probably seen them on a lot of green screens and blue screens. But that is the reason for that. It's just so that we can know what the camera is doing.
Okay, we have one question, so I'm gonna ask Anthony to unmute. There you go.
Question I have is about tools. What sort of tools are you using? Are you using After Effects, Flame, Mocha? Like what are the tools that you're using to execute?
We use mostly for compositing, which is our 2D compositing like this. We use Nuke. We sometimes will use After Effects, not often. Yeah, it's mainly Nuke, which is the industry standard. For 3D, we'll use Maya mostly. And for matte paintings, again, digital backgrounds, mostly Photoshop. And when I say the word matte painting, don't think of it as hand painting. What it is, a lot of times, it's actual photographs of buildings or structures or things that we replicate, and create backgrounds from that. It's not hand drawing or hand painting. A lot of times it's a photograph that we manipulate.
Like in Boardwalk Empire, creating Atlantic City in the, I guess it was the 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
That's all matte painting, those backgrounds, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'll show that next. First, I'll show this. Here's an example of a green screen driving shot where we could not shoot plates for. It's a snowstorm in the winter. That would have been hard to create. This is all CG. This is Woman in the Window. Spoiler alert. This is all created in 3D, in CG, because it had to be.
And is that much more expensive than the?
Much more expensive, and I'll explain why. I'll try to show a good example of 3D versus 2D next, and why that's a big deal. But first, since I'm here, let me just go through some guns and say blood and guns. This is a completely composited shot. The gun blast will be not computer generated, not CGI. When we put muzzle flashes in guns, it's a real gun firing in front of a black screen, which we have libraries of every gun you can imagine. And we pick one we think looks good, and we put that in. Same with blood. We have libraries of blood bursts and all kinds of things that we can use and place into the shot, such as this one. So again, the reason for that, a couple of reasons. Safety is the obvious one. The other thing is, if you did this for real with blanks, you'd have to reset. You'd have to have a safety person there, an armorer to handle the guns. You have to reload after each take. You'd have to clean up the blood off of your wardrobe and your location. It just doesn't make sense anymore. Blood and guns is a lot easier to do now. Very simple to do. Muzzle flash is usually one frame. There's another one. Very simple. Obviously, you could not do that stunt even with blanks, close range shot like that. It's a rubber gun. We added the blood to the door behind him. And again, why would you even want to shoot this for real in any way? You'd have to clean up your set after every take. It makes no sense. So that's an example. And again, these elements are real elements. They're not fake. They're not, these are real. It's not real blood, but it's a real liquid onto a structure that we extract from our library and put it onto the door.
And just to be clear there, when you say your library, is it a library just that Brainstorm Digital has, or is it the industry shares this information?
You can purchase libraries. There's a lot of free stuff out there. Some of the things we have are free. It's so commonplace now, it's not expensive. You can get really good elements, and some people make them just for fun. You can find them on YouTube and with green screens, and it's readily available. And I'll post my email if anyone has a need for this kind of thing or any question. Just shoot me an email. The one thing I really disturbs me is when somebody shoots a film and didn't consult with anybody and shoots something and then comes to us and say, oh, can you do this, or can you fix this? And I go, oh man, if they only came to us, we would have helped them, tell them the right way to shoot it to make it easier for everybody. Because there's a lot of basic things that that you can do if you do it right and consult beforehand. And we offer free consulting. If anyone's doing a movie and wants to know how to do something, just email me. I'm happy to explain it, because I hate seeing filmmakers get boxed in a corner and have to spend loads of money because they have to fix their shot. It seems like a real waste.
Yeah. We do have one other question here, Glenn, from Luke.
Yeah.
Glenn, when you say a library, is that like a Shutterstock for photographs?
Well, there are libraries, stock footage libraries like Shutterstock, which you can use for background plates or to fill in green screens. There's also libraries, it's not Shutterstock, but there's so many out there, but they have blood. You can look up blood and you'll find 100 different blood elements. Same with fire. You can, there's loads of fire elements, because that's hard to do in CG. There's all kinds of things like that. Debris, smoke, rain. There's lots of elements you can use out there, and they're not very expensive.
Thank you.
Here's an example. A lot of times what we say to filmmakers too is, if you can give us something, a piece of something that's real, we can duplicate it or extend a set. And I'll show you what I mean a bit later, but here's an example where they wanted this guy, this is a remake of Papillon. He gets stabbed to death in the back of this boat. So we asked the makeup people to just give us one wound. Just give us one, so we can see the color that everybody likes. We can see how the light is interacting with it. And then we can multiply that and make it look like that. So only one of these wounds was done by makeup. The rest we added. But it helps to know what it looks like for real, or at least how it looks like in the environment, in the lighting. We can see what that is, and then we can duplicate it. Here's another one who, some people say, well, I don't want to, I want it to look real. Well, here's an example too. We did the gun blast and all the blood, and I defy anyone to tell me this does not look real. It's all blood elements we took from a library. And again, not difficult at all. This blood pool is very easy to do, to expand for any artist. The spatter on the right, I think we took that off of one of those libraries of blood splatting against a green screen, and we just put it there. Let me go fast forward a little bit. This is all blood and guns and stuff. Here's a fun movie. This is a little bit different. Movie called Nerve. There's David Franco hanging from a girder. He's supposed to be above New York City. So this one was a little bit different, because this was supposed to be photographed from a drone. I'll show you that reel later, but that's a little more involved. We had to create a sort of a 180-degree version of New York City looking down. But I show this because obviously it's very safe. There's padding 4 feet below David Franco. He's got the rig hooked up to his back anyway, in case he did slip. But that's supposed to look like that. So let me show you some, this is Uncut Gems, spoiler alert. The end of the movie, again, they didn't want to do any makeup on Sandler. In the end of the movie, we go into the wound and keep going into outer space. This is again a photograph of a wound. We did a little bit of CG liquid. They wanted it to spurt out a little bit. If you can see, it's probably stuttering on your end, but you get the idea. So something I did want to show you, just to give you an example of how if you build a piece of something that's real, it's not that difficult to extend it. And I'll show you, here's a good one. Let me share my screen real quick. So this is Boardwalk Empire. Oh wait, this is a bunch of set extensions. This is The Men Who Built America, a show I produced and supervised on set. This shot is supposed to be the Panama Canal. So how do you shoot the Panama Canal? Well, we found a rock quarry and we shot in this rock quarry. And then we just extended the end of it. Hold on a second, just quiet this down here. We extended it to make the canal and added explosion, added some trains, some things. Pretty easy shot. Here's another one that comes up. They said, okay, this is John D. Rockefeller, his first oil refinery. How do we do it cheaply? Well, one way to do it without lugging a green screen onto the set is keep Rockefeller, keep him away from this. So we don't have to rotoscope him. There's no green screen. We simply shot this in a clear thing. So there's the shot. He's not crossing anything, very simple to do. We just get I mean, the matte painting is pretty involved and takes a good eye, but it works and it's cheap. Here's another one. They're supposed to be looking across the Mississippi at how are we going to make a bridge that crosses over to St. Louis? Well, there it is. Again, the guys aren't crossing. We're not changing anything in the shot except above the waterline. Pretty easy to do. Here's another example. It's supposed to be Rockefeller's oil refineries. What we said was, you know, if you build one, we'll know how the light's hitting it. It'll match the time of day. Just build us one out of some wood. Simple build, right? We can take that now and we can multiply that. We know how the light's hitting it. We added a couple things in the foreground, but at least we know what the light's doing. As you can see, the only people interacting with the structure is the one that they built, which also keeps the cost down. Here's another one. Now I'm showing you these things. I'm going to talk about 2D versus 3D and why 2D is cost effective and 3D is expensive. What I've been showing you is all 2D images. And by that, it means it's not changing perspective. The big difference between 2D and 3D, again, this is Boardwalk Empire. These are all 2D matte paintings, which means they're flat. Sometimes we'll have a couple layers and move them to create some parallax, but 2D image it's flat. It's what you can do in Photoshop. A 3D image, here's another one. They wanted this to look like a port in Europe. So we just said, well, give us some green screen. All we need to do, again, if you're thinking about rotoscoping and creating a matte to create to add your background image, well, all we really need to do is worry about these people that are moving. Everything else, it's a simple, it's a cutout, the way you would in Photoshop, and just get rid of all this. Easy to do. All we're concerned about is not having to rotoscope every little person, every single frame. That would be a nightmare. So we said, all right, just give us some green to cover those people. It's a static shot. The camera's not moving. Might be a little tilt or something here, but I don't remember. It's not going to affect us. I mean, these are some fairly high-end matte paintings, but you get the idea. Here's another example, very similar to the Wolf of Wall Street. They want to do this impressive, big, impressive shot. It's, I forget whose mansion it was supposed to be. Anyway, they wanted it to look very impressive, but they didn't want to spend any money. So I said, okay, here's what you do. Let me find my drawer. We said, keep these characters inside, build us this structure. Just build this. Keep the characters inside here. And the rest, easy. We'll get rid of all this, no problem. As long as we don't have to, again, rotoscope all these people. So they built that. And then we're able to, again, I'm showing some fairly high-end matte painting work, but it doesn't have to be this complex. This happens to be obviously a period movie, but you can do this with anything in your movie. If you want to replace it with an exotic location, or you want to turn, you need to shoot in the summer and your movie takes place in the winter. Things like that. It's not that hard to do. If you look at this, build a piece or keep your characters within an area and replace the rest. Here's a shot I don't think turned out that great. We'll skip that one. But again, they wanted the port of Boston, show called the Sons of Liberty. Well, they green screened the whole set. They had a whole bunch of scenes here, so they did a pretty elaborate green screen. And we tried to make it look like Boston. I don't think it's that great. I think it's a little too hazy back in the deep background, but the director liked it. Okay. Let me skip past some of this. Oh, here's a good one. The Immigrant. It's supposed to be turn of the century New York. So we said, okay, again, green screen above the people's heads. We'll do the rest. And so we actually did some research, found out what buildings really were there back then, and we put them in. Now we told them too, they wanted it to be a crowded street. We said, well, address the street. We're not going to replace all these awnings and all these things and add cars. No, that's the hard part. Dress the street, cover everyone's heads. We can do the rest, not expensive at all. There's the Wolf of Wall Street shot again. So, does anyone have any questions so far? Yeah.
Roger?
Roger? Unmute yourself.
There you go.
So now,
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
yeah, very interesting. Thank you. I'm a graphic designer, so I work in 2D, and sometimes I had cases you mentioned. So like a car, for example, that I shot in the rain, but then during the shoot, the rain was not on all windows the same. So I had to put something onto the windows to have always the same raindrops on the window. And that was really difficult to do because we had no green screen. Also with the guns, my third movie was using guns, and I did it exactly like you did. And then I had one shot in front of a tropical beach, but I shot it in Berlin. We don't have beaches there.
Mhm.
So I tried to shoot it at a river that has some sand, but in post it didn't look good. So I had to rotoscope everything, and it was a pain in the ass, and it was the ending of the movie. And then some people maybe don't realize it, but some said it looks cheap. So I know that companies like the one you have are very expensive, and I understand that these effects can save money, but with no budget, I still have to do it myself,
Mhm.
or I would have to hire you, and I wouldn't able to afford it. So my question is, what do you suggest? So because I would prefer shooting a car scene, a driving car scene in an actual scene,
Right.
because then I wouldn't have to pay extra money for work what you do.
Well, one way to do it is this, and I do this a lot. To bring a shot to a company like us will cost more, just because we have an infrastructure and all that. I know a lot of artists, and especially now since the pandemic, a lot of artists live around the country, and they'll do shots on the side. So if someone comes to me and say, I can't afford this shot, what do you recommend? I know plenty of artists, you might know some too, that they'll do shots on their own on a weekend. And if they're not busy, they'll charge next to nothing to do it. Again, to save you money, and they make a little extra money. If they look at something they know they can do it, I can do this in a half a day. Like any shot that comes to us, we have to charge at least $500 just to get it through our pipeline, because we ingest it, we log it, we track it, we send it to the editors, we send the finished product to the color correct. There's a lot that happens before we even do any work. But if you have a shot or a couple of shots, you can find artists who will do it cheaply. And everyone has their own home studio now.
So for example, my upcoming short movie that I plan here in LA has an end scene where a guy is hit by birds. So
Mhm.
that birds are falling from the sky. And I was actually thinking that I would use one or two real birds for his face,
Mhm.
and the other ones to make them in CGI, right?
Yeah, but you wouldn't need CGI for that. The correct thought we had is use birds to interact with your people. That you should do for real. That's very hard to do with visual effects. You should do anything interacting with people is good. You can also drop a couple of dummy birds in the background, just one or two, and we can replicate it. The same way we replicated the makeup with the blood. Just do one so we can see what it should look like, how the light's hitting it. It's easy to replicate that. Here's something we should talk about. Oh, your question, Maya?
Maya, yes, let's go to her. I'll do that.
Thanks. Hello. I was wondering a question about your work. Like, what was the hardest, most challenging situation in terms of special effects that you've done in a scene? Like, what was it that made it like, and how did you kind of get through it? Like a situation where you had to kind of improvise, maybe.
That's a good question. I'll show one thing, and this will also lead into 2D versus 3D. Why 3D is expensive. Let me show you, let's see, Z, hereditary. Let me show you, what am I looking for? Here's a movie. Here's the difference between 2D and 3D and why this got very expensive. A Woody Allen movie called Wonder Wheel. Oh, let me turn that down. So basically, the story is this character, I'll fast forward this. These characters live in a fictional place within Coney Island. How are you going to do that? The only way, and Woody wanted moving parts to all these things. This had to be 3D. And let me just play this. So they built a set, they put green screen all around the windows. You can see our tracking markers there. Because the camera's moving and the objects are moving, we had to build the entire park in 3D. And they fought us on it for a long time, and we convinced them this was the only way to do this if he wanted to move the camera around. So all these structures we have to build in 3D, they have to move. They're changing perspective as the Ferris wheel moves. Those objects in
You're
the back.
talking about building in 3D. Are you talking literally?
Yes. Well, I literally meaning, I'm going to show you, I'm trying to show a good example of the difference between 2D and 3D. This is why, and to answer Roger's question, how you would get around not spending a lot of money is always in pre-production, consult with somebody, even if you're on location that may not seem right. We get this all the time. They'll send us a photograph from their location scout and say, what do you think? Does this make sense? Are you able to add this? And then we'll say something like, yes, can you keep Rockefeller to the right? And we'll put something on the left, or, find ways to make it a little more cost effective. Big difference between 2D and 3D. Okay, if your shot is me in your movie, it's a static camera, right? Everything behind me can be done in Photoshop. Everything. You could rotoscope me and replace this with anything you want that's not moving. Like, okay, this guitar over here, you could paint that in Photoshop. You can make it blue, make it red, make it a different model, do whatever you want, make it a violin. As soon as you move your camera around this object, you can't do that in Photoshop. Photoshop is flat. As soon as your camera moves around it, or your object, even if I did this and it wasn't moving, you could do this in Photoshop. You could paint something on here. As soon as I do this, you can't do that in Photoshop. This has to be a 3D model. If your camera moves around it, or if this moves, because you're changing, it's all about perspective. Why is it expensive? You have to, if you had a shot that zoomed around me and had to show this room, you have to build a model. You've all seen wireframe models. That's what that is. It's a 3D model that you can move around in space, move your camera around it. You have to texture it. You have to light it. You have to composite it into your shot. That's 4 people. And you pretty much 4 times the cost, 2D versus 3D. So when you're doing your films, think about your camera moves. People come to us all the time, and directors will say, we read the script and they go, hey, can we do this? Or can we do that? And I say, we can do anything. And my first question is, what's the camera doing? Very, very important thing with visual effects, 2D versus 3D, because of the cost. If that makes any sense.
That was awesome.
But that's, yeah. One thing I will say though, when you do a film, it's very important to consult with somebody. Again, we do it for free. Most VFX houses will do it for free. Nobody wants to see anybody waste money. And of course, if you don't have money to go to a vendor, a VFX house like mine, you can call on me or people in the business, And a lot of artists work from home. They love doing side jobs. They make a little bit of money on the side, and they have all the tools they need for most of these things. So it's just, a movie will come to us that has 100 shots. It makes sense because it's a lot of logistics, tracking it, keeping track of versions, and that kind of stuff. So, but
Anthony, you have another question?
Yeah, actually, my question was about Wonder Wheel again. You mentioned that they sort of fought you on using 3Ds and CGI. Were they planning on using 2D plates?
well, they wanted to, but Woody wanted the structures had to move. So you have the thing again, changing perspective. It's a carnival ride that goes around in circles. That's not Photoshop. They would have been stuck with images that aren't moving, and that wasn't going to work. So he fought for it, and his movies are generally low budget movies, but
Yeah,
this
that's
was
why I was surprised. I was surprised because they are generally low budget. I was surprised that.
yeah, they went for it. It was important for the story because they lived in the park, which is not real.
Right.
But that was kind of the basis of the story, that they live in this place. So that was the reason for that.
And I think we
Again,
have a question on the side there. How much savings is there doing CG rather than just a location in a building like that? Are you talking thousands per day?
No, a shot like, a matte painting shot might cost you a couple thousand. You might find an artist to do it for a couple hundred. It depends on your shot. If you're replacing a little window and you need to put Paris in the background, that's simple, really easy. If you're following a character up 5 flights of stairs and he's going by window after window and the camera's moving all over the place, that's a little more expensive. So it's you got to do a cost benefit analysis of your shot and plan your shots ahead of time. And talk to somebody and say, and if it winds up the only way to do it is going to cost too much, find a cost-effective way to do it. That's what we do. People rely on us a lot for that reason. Like I said, we don't work on these Disney, the big Will Ferrell Christmas movie very often. Most of the stuff is like Trial of the Chicago 7. We worked on The Greatest Showman. Well, that was a big movie, but they cut a lot of corners.
I think earlier, Glenn, that the mats that are being done, sometimes you just take those from an old stock photograph of Paris in the 1920s or what have you.
If the quality is good enough, you can do that. If it's a modern day story, there's lots of things you can do. You can replace skies. You can add buildings in the background. If it's period stuff, it's a little harder. We tend to do research on old photographs and try to replicate those. Yeah.
Any other questions from our audience?
Yes.
Luz?
It's more of just a comment. I've seen videos and I've seen talks on visual effects, and I think this has been the one that is just very, very well told for someone like me to understand it. So thank you for that. I really like the whole idea of how you tell the directors, like if you want this, just build me a structure, or just the way they're putting the green screen prior to it and prepping the shot. It was just very well explained. So thank you.
Well, thanks. Well, what I'm trying to do is educate people so they're not intimidated by visual effects.
Right.
And a couple of things to think about, which I keep mentioning: 2D versus 3D. Think about your camera moves, rotoscoping, because rotoscoping can be done. But if you're going to rotoscope Raja, what's the trouble you're going to run into? His hair. You can't cut that out. If it was a green screen behind him, you can extract very, very fine detail. Rotoscoping has limitations. It's tedious and possible to do, but the green screen's better for that reason. So you know, if you know what you can do and what's cost effective and is going to still look good. There's one last thing I should show you. The trial of the Chicago 7. I get this question a lot. That's why I wanted to show you. Crowd tiling. You may have heard the term. Basically, I get this question. We have a scene where we need to put a lot of people in the scene. Well, this is crowd tiling. So because the camera's not moving, okay, we're not changing perspective on these people. Trial of Chicago 7 came to us and said, how can we do this? We don't want to spend a fortune. A couple shots happen outside the courthouse. So let me just show. Okay, so this was the original shot. All of these extras, we would mix them up and move them around the set and shoot plates. We can do that because the camera is not moving. If the camera was moving, you'd have to replicate that camera move in order to make this work, which is very hard to do. You can do it with what they call a motion control camera. You may have heard of that. All that is it duplicates the camera move exactly. So you could have a moving camera, but it's expensive. It takes a long time to set up and then to shoot. So all those people it's the same group of people. These are our plates that we shot. So we just shoot a take, have them do the action, move them around, and then you get that. And the only way this works, again, with static camera, we didn't have green screen. So unfortunately, we had to rotoscope. They didn't want to put a green screen and move that around. We were pressed for time. So we did have to rotoscope these people, unfortunately, but that was a decision that they made to save time on set, and they were willing to pay for us to do that. So yeah, we did.
Do you have a question?
I have actually another question regarding back to the Wolf of Wall Street, that shot where you added Italy, the water around that shot where the family's walking on the pavement. There's a move on that. Was that move added afterwards?
No, that was a move, but it was a move that didn't change the perspective. In other words, if here's my camera, if you move up and down like this, or left or right, you're not changing the perspective of anything. It's like if I do this.
Right. So you're able to
This could be a big, yeah. It's a big matte painting. If the camera was on a crane and going like this, well, then that's a CG environment. But that's one thing to know. I'm glad you brought that up. It doesn't mean you have to have your camera locked off all the time. You can do what we call a nodal move. If you go like this up and down, you can do it with the camera at home, and you'll see. It can be a big matte painting that you can pan left and right or tilt up and down. Just the camera's not moving in space. That's where the 3D comes in.
Great.
Okay, Roger.
I just wanted to ask shortly, because I tried on this green screen stuff and it turned out very difficult. So I think I won't do it again, because the difficulty is always the hair, like you said. And then you have to light the background very, that everything is lit by in the same way, so that the software can detect the green tone in the right way. So what would you recommend in that regard?
Well, you said it yourself. It's what helps. What makes it easier is an evenly lit green screen as much as you can. It's not always possible, especially if you're outside and the sun is moving around. You sometimes get shadows, but the goal is to have it as evenly lit as possible. And remember, you only have to cover your things that are moving. That's the main thing, like hair, people, you know, a lot of times we'll go on set and they'll say, well, we can't bring a green screen onto this location. We don't have time. We don't have the resources. Well, I'll say, well, what's the shot, Kate? Is there something you can put in the background? We just did it. I was on a show called George and Tammy with Jessica Chastain, and they had a scene. They want to put the Ryman Theater, the Grand Ole Opry, in the background. And I said, but we can't do that. So they had a tour bus in front of her, which is very easy for us to cut out the top of the tour bus and put the theater above it. And she's walking in front of the bus back and forth. It's very simple. No green screen, you know, we just have something blocking the motion, so we don't have to rotoscope it.
So how do you solve the green screen problem with the hair? Because often it reflects in the hair, and then you have thin hair.
Yeah,
Which software are you doing it, and how are you solving the problem?
we're doing it in Nuke. What we try to be aware of is we try to get the green screen a little bit farther away from our subjects. There's not a lot of green spill, which is just the green sometimes can contaminate your set. You want to move it back as far as you can. If you have a subject with hair, like frizzy hair, we had that problem on the remake of Annie. We had a young actor with very frizzy hair. It was very difficult, even with the green screen. A lot of times they'll say, can you put that person in a ponytail or a hat like this? Or are they bald, you know? That's easy. But yeah, fine hair, it's hard to do. The thing to do is try to find tricks where your character doesn't have to be on the green screen. Either put him in a hat or put something, have him walk near a bush. Like if I was shooting you right now, I would say, can we shoot this at a higher angle? Put you in front of the bush and we'll replace the rest. You know, try to find tricks because, yeah, that doesn't always work great. So, you know, it's good to be aware of that. Hair is pretty tricky.
All right. Well, if we have no further questions, are you about done, Glenn?
I think so. I mean, I have other things if you want to see, but it's getting late. I mean, I think I've shown a lot of examples and hopefully demonstrated, again, the things that you can do to not be intimidated by visual effects, just and always consult. I'm going to actually send you guys something. I'm just going to send my email. Why is it not going? There it is. If you have any questions, you know, now or whenever in the future, again, I really hate to see filmmakers jump into something without consulting and then get stuck in a corner. We get that a lot. We had a student who they based this whole film around a CG creature, a furry CG monster in the movie, and they had no money. Obviously, just thinking about 2D versus 3D, a CG creature moves, has hair, moves all around, changing perspective, very, very difficult to do. You know, I would have suggested, let's find a way creatively. You want it to be scary, let's make it really dark. Let's, you know, you can get a puppet for a piece of the shot. We can extend it, we can make eyes move. And instead of a CG creature, they backed themselves into a corner and couldn't finish the movie. So.
Sounds like your field, especially within filmmaking, is planning, planning, and planning.
Yes, planning is everything. And there's always a way to get your vision across without some, and if you can do it without CG, that's even better. If you can make it, you know, if you shoot it for real, it will look better. But sometimes it can't be, like a period piece or a stunt or a gun or a wound or things like that where you need to use CG. But you know, always feel free to consult and ask questions, and yeah, consider it open invitation, because I enjoy helping out filmmakers and you know, find ways to fulfill your vision without breaking the bank.
Well, that's really great, Glenn. I appreciate that. I'm sure all of our filmmakers do as well. You've been very generous with your time here tonight. and, offering up your email there was very kind as well. So we really appreciate it on behalf of the Ridgewood Guild International Film Festival. Thank you very much and look forward to
Okay.
seeing you in person.
And yeah, come see me, come introduce yourself on Thursday if we run into each other. I'll be there. All right,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank
All
you.
right, good night.
Good night.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.